a jobs program for North Korean scientists, because I think that that's probably an effect it's going to have in North Korea. So again, I think that it would have foiled some of their other international relations objectives, and I think the administration has been very willing to be dishonest with the American people about what it's trying to do.
Ms. Heinrichs, you didn't, I believe, mention the Musadam missile in your remarks. Now, there have been 2 failed tests of the Musadam. What do you think the prognosis is for North Korea with the Musadam, given these 2 failed tests?
Yeah, I think what we should learn from that is they're determined to get it. They're determined to actually make it work. You know, so I'm not one of those people that every time I see North Korea blow up a missile on its launch pad, and I think, oh, see, look, they're not very good at it. We don't have anything to be worried about. What I see is a determined regime that's starving its own people and willing to use its resources to actually get its missile program right. And I think that that's what we should take away from that. So, you know, we have seen great progress over the years. Every time we think that they're just not going to achieve something, they're not going to achieve that 3rd stage with their ICAS, they're not going to actually get a satellite to orbit, they're not going to be able to do this, they do it. So with that, I would just say it's a matter of time unless we can actually stop it.
Peter? Yeah, I just thought I'd add a couple things just for the record. Is that with respect to Mr. Panetta, back in 2012, Representative Turner from Ohio asked about the transporter launcher system that North Korea showcased during the military parade, and this is what Reuters says. Panetta declined to give additional details about any Chinese support for North Korea's missile capabilities in a public setting due to, quote, the sensitivity of that information. And then he continued, quote, but clearly there's been assistance along those lines, end of quote. And then he talks about no question that there's a threat, but he uses, they're very careful with their language, and I think Rebecca's 100% right. This was due to, let's not upset the Chinese with respect to Iran. But I would make reference to an extraordinary book by former Secretary of the Air Force Tom Reed and former Deputy National Security Advisor to President Reagan, Tom Reed, who wrote a book called The Nuclear Express. And in that there are chapters devoted solely to Chinese efforts to proliferate nuclear weapons, particularly starting with the Khan Network in Pakistan, and then also Libya, North Korea, and Iran. And it's an extraordinary book. Now there are 2. There's the Nuclear Express, and then there's one he wrote called Armageddon, which are both the same subject, which is the nuclear proliferation. And I urge anybody in the audience and panel here to get the 2 books, because they are a detailed look at what China has done, which, as we all know, has been under the radar screen and not been laid out by our administration or previous administrations. I think all along because there's always a reason we don't want to upset China. And as my former boss at NDU, General Dunn, and my former boss at the Air Force Association, General Dunn, has said, well, if North Korea and China don't like something, keep doing it. At least that's his philosophy.
Yeah, I would just say, of course, it's much more complicated for our allies in South Korea, and I think that we need to be sensitive to that as we, again, even though I did make the suggestion that we should stop granting credence to the argument that China continues to make, that if the United States deploys that to South Korea, that it would somehow degrade the Chinese offensive capability, et cetera. You know, again, we sort of take this for granted. Every administration comes in and then tries to convince the Chinese and the Russians that our missile defense systems for our allies are not meant to defend against them. But why doesn't anybody say, why do you want the ability to target our allies or the United States? If you're not targeting the United States, you shouldn't care. And so I think that, you know, again, we need to be delicate about the diplomacy here and understand how difficult the diplomatic situation is for South Korea vis-a-vis China. We should be sensitive to that. I'm not suggesting that we unnecessarily provoke, but I am suggesting that we start to look at the way we talk about this. And again, it's certainly not hold out THAAD, for instance, as a chess piece with China. I mean, this is something that our allies need. This is something that U.S. Forces Korea needs. And so I think that the United States can move forward at any time as long as as soon as they're willing to do so.
Just to follow up on your last comment about that, no, we cannot acquiesce to any foreign, to China on how to defend our soldiers and the alliance. So I strongly agree with you that if we determine that we need THAAD to defend against North Korean missile threat, then that's a decision the alliance makes, and China does not get a vote in our defense, and we should not acquiesce to that. And again, understand that THAAD is a threat to Chinese offensive missile capabilities. It's only a threat if China intends to fire its missiles at South Korea. And so if that's China's intent, then yes, it is a threat. So I agree with you that the decision on THAAD is an alliance decision, and one that's made in the best interest from a military and security perspective.
I would just add that too, of course, THAAD is a terminal ballistic missile defense system to intercept missiles in their terminal phase of flight, short-range system. It is not there to defend South Korea against Chinese missiles. It's not able to do. It's not what it's designed to do. But I guess my point is more of to continue to make the argument though that it isn't going to provide protection. And the other thing the Chinese are worried about, they're worried about the alliance. I think they're worried about the alliance between the United States and South Korea. But I think we should press into that. I don't think there should be any daylight between the United States and South Korea as it pertains to mutual security there. But again, I think that it does sort of say the argument. If at some point the United States does need to build more sophisticated, complex missile defense systems based on the threats that we do perceive, I think that we're now in a new missile age in which intentionally keeping a system limited so as not to upset China and Russia is just a thing of the past.
Thank you. Now, the floor is open. Okay, Paul? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Paul Gallagher. Before I ask my question, I'd like to make a motion that we do away with the phrase nuclear umbrella. An umbrella is a protective, defensive device, and retaliation doesn't protect anything. If the DPRK launches the first strike against Seoul and we retaliate by destroying Pyongyang, it doesn't save any lives in Seoul. So let's not call it a nuclear umbrella. In the old days when we were talking with the Soviet Union, it was reasonable to say that there were logical, sane people in charge and we could deter them by threatening them. It's not at all clear to me, and this is the first half of my question, it's not at all clear to me that we're dealing with a sane, reasonable person at the head of DPRK. You mentioned two essential factors that go into our decision-making process, intent and capability. I'm not at all clear that we understand the thought process, the personality, the temperament of Kim Jong-un. I'm not at all clear that we know his intent or can guess it, and I'm very bad at tea leaves myself. On the other hand, I think we should stipulate that they have the capability. There have been widespread news reports that they have bombs, that they have missiles, they could launch if they wanted to on a moment's notice as first strike against Seoul or Tokyo or someplace nearby. It's not enough that they can't, whether they can reach the U.S. homeland or not. I think it would be a huge failure for us if they struck either of those two countries. So then the second half of the question is not about intent, but about capability. If they try to launch, does THAAD work, or THAAD, or however you say it? Will that protect South Korea or Japan or wherever we install it from an incoming missile, or will it miss and fail and leave us with the only choice, which is retaliation? Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
There's a lot of questions in that question. I'll start with the last one. THAAD has been proven. It is one of our most mature ballistic missile defense systems that we have in our entire BMDS. So, pardon me? I would put my life on the line. I've seen THAAD actually tested out in Hawaii. It's an amazing system. My old boss, Congressman Franks, watched a THAAD intercept in which after the THAAD intercept hit the test target like it was supposed to do, it then went out and looked and hit the the largest piece of debris that was still in the atmosphere and hit it. So THAAD is one of our most mature ballistic missile defense systems. And if U.S. Forces Korea is saying we need this to protect our guys, they don't say that for no reason. They need it, and if it's there to protect Seoul, we can provide some of the various cities protection. I think South Korea is going to need more than that. Again, this is a new missile age. I think we are now into a time in international relations where ballistic missile defense is going to be one of the primary components of how we demonstrate our alliances. And so I know, South Korea is already working on its own missile defense system. I think that that's fine. I think it's going to take a long time. And I think that there are other opportunities in which the United States companies have already developed some ballistic missile defense systems in which South Korea might be interested in and should pursue. So I think THAAD is just, THAAD and Patriot is another one. It's going to be, these are systems, and Aegis B&D might provide some protection. Certainly does for Japan as well. So again, yes, I have full confidence in the THAAD missile defense system. Your first point, though, I wanted to disagree if I could just a little bit. The point of nuclear deterrence, of course, is that we don't want to get to the point where we're actually exchanging nuclear weapons. You made a very good point about North Korean regime not at this point, not actually striking with nuclear weapons. And I would say, why is that? Why haven't they do have the capability for the shorter range stuff? Why haven't they done so? And I think because deterrence so far is working. Something is motivating the regime not to do that. And I think, does the North Korean regime care about North Korean civilians there? I would suggest that they don't. I think that the United States and South Korea care a lot more about North Korean civilians than the North Korean government does. And I think the North Korean government knows that full well. So targeting, so if the United States, it makes no sense for the United States to target, of course, North Korean cities. That makes no sense because it wouldn't be a credible deterrent. The North Korean regime doesn't care about North Korean cities. It does care about North Korean regime survival. And so I think that the United States has to have a robust and modern nuclear deterrence in order to actually target those deeply buried targets, facilities that actually sustain the North Korean regime and the North Korean military programs. So those are the things I think that the United States needs to look towards whenever we're talking about nuclear deterrence. But again, point taken on the umbrella, of course, but the idea here is that we are providing nuclear security so that South Korea does not have to acquire their own nuclear weapons. And hopefully that the United States won't have to deploy nuclear weapons once again to South Korea, which of course we haven't had there for a couple of decades. That's a couple of them, so I hit a couple of your points. I appreciate it.
Microphone, please. She's from the spread.
Hi, we've addressed the capabilities, but to get back to the intent point, so how do we go about getting after KJU's intent and will? And you addressed it just a little bit, just now, but that is a very hard thing to get after for any adversary, so I'm just curious as to your thoughts.
It is very difficult, which is why, again, especially as it relates to South Korea, this is why missile defense is so important. There's more uncertainty about what North Korea may or may not do, which is why we need ballistic missile defense. The Missile Defense Agency, of course, the United States has and others within the Pentagon have talked recently a lot about left of launch, which is looking at the whole kill chain. And the United States can't just sit back and wait until a missile is launched at us because, and here's the thing too, North Korea has a lot of missiles. We're not trying to catch all of them. What the United States wants to do, especially in regards to South Korea, is absorb an initial blow so that South Korea with the United States has the ability to actually respond on our own terms and not just receive an onslaught of a ballistic missile attack. And so it's a critical component of our overall strategic posture that we're offering. I'm not suggesting that it's the one thing that we need to pursue. But again, we can begin to see what the regime there is about to do because we can see what sort of missiles they're testing. We can see that they've increased their nuclear program, the number of tests, et cetera. They're supposed to allegedly test another one. And so they're clearly relying more on this capability. And so as we just continue to try to figure out what it's about to do, this is why the KN-08 is so scary. It's a road mobile missile. We have a much shorter decision time to even respond. So again, getting at your point, how do you figure out the intent when they're seemingly or being very erratic about what it is that they're doing? And I would just suggest that this is why it's not the time for the United States to unilaterally reduce our own nuclear weapons, our own conventional options if we do need to respond. And also, this isn't the time to increase ballistic missile defense. It's just, the other thing I would say is this is another reason that NORTHCOM and MDA have been pounding the table about increased radar and sensors so that we can actually see what's going on a lot better, because it is much harder to assess what they may or may not do in the coming days and months. So it's a very hard thing to get at, but I think that that's why it requires really seriously thinking about deterrence and what is important to the regime. You do not deter other countries based on what you think is important. You deter other countries by what you think they think is important, and to figure out what's important to them. And against the other piece on a nuclear umbrella, assurance is determined by what is needed by our allies around assurance. So even if the United States thinks that conventional weapons are the only thing that we need, if South Korea says, no, I want a nuclear promise, a nuclear surety from the United States, then that's what's required to prevent proliferation of nuclear weapons to the South as well.
I'd like to add to what Rebecca said, that General Dunn, who was, that I mentioned previously, was the chief military advisor to our negotiators with North Korea. And he and I collectively developed a pyramid called the North Korean 10-step program. And anywhere on that 10-step program ends, the most important is reunification of the country under North Korean rule. And the various steps include withdrawal of American forces from South Korea, end of exercises between the South Korean and United States